Hi everybody, this is a look at the Nikon F3P, which was introduced in 1983, and it was produced for the photojournalist or press people, hence the P in the name, and they demanded a more rugged weatherproof camera for their use and other features etc., which they didn't want or did want. So Nikon changed the F3 and incorporated those features and that into this camera. I'm going to show you all the differences between this and a standard F3. So as I say, it came out in 1983 and the price in the UK in 1985, the retail price was £759, which was a lot of money back then. And it actually sold for the same price as the F3T model. Now to start off then, the photojournalist demanded a more weatherproof, because obviously they're generally using the camera outside, and if it's raining they need more weather sealing. So they made quite a few changes regarding that. The most obvious one is on the shutter release, which has a rubber surround all around the shutter release to prevent water getting in. Also the finder, and it's a different finder on the F3P, it's called a DE5, and that's because it's a titanium one, and it's also got a hot shoe, which I'll talk about in a bit. The finder also has a rubber seal around the bottom, but that was actually introduced for the HP, the DE3 finder, so it wasn't a special thing for this particular camera. Now other weather sealing was O-rings around the various like the shutter dial, the advance lever, and the rewind crank dial, and I also believe there's possibly a gasket on the base plate as well to help water not get through. Obviously one thing you've got to consider is, although the camera is more weatherproof, you've got to take into account the lens, because a lot of the lenses don't have rubber rings around them, so that's another area where obviously water can get in. Now looking at the finder, as I said, the other alteration to the finder is a hot shoe, because press people tended to use a flash regularly with their photography. In fact, most use a flash all the time, and so they incorporated a standard hot shoe on the top of the finder, instead of having to use either a dedicated flash or an accessory on the rewind crank. And I think one thing that they did wrong with this is they made it so it wasn't TTL flash, and I don't understand why. There's obviously a reason for that, but you can use the flash in auto mode or manual, but not through the lens. So that's something that they didn't get right. The contacts for the flash, you see these pins sticking out at the bottom of the finder, which make contact with the pins in the finder box. So it provides all the details as regards the flash ready light and for the flash firing. And say the finder is made of titanium as well, which is stronger and lighter, but it's only, the titanium is only in the finder on this model, not on the top plates as in the F3T model. But obviously a problem with titanium is they tend to mark more easily. As you can see on this one, it's got a bit of rubbing on the edge, which isn't too bad. It is a camera that's been used, and say I'm using it now, so it's just something you've got to be aware of with these titanium finders and cameras. They wear very easily. Other changes is it actually came with a different back to this. I've put a standard F3 back on it, but it did actually come with this MF6B back, which was introduced around the same time as the F3P. And I said before, this one there was actually an MF6, and the difference between the MF6 and the MF6B is they put an extra roller on the back plate, which I believe probably gives it a bit more pressure on the film. But the way this works is, and say the reason that they put this on this particular model is for the press, who generally used them with the MD4 motor drives. Obviously you don't want to be winding on when you're taking pictures quickly, so they used a motor drive. And the advantage of this back is it's got this little lever here which senses when the film has left the advance crank, which stops turning that roller, and it sends a signal to these contacts and then to the motor drive, and it stops the rewinding, the automatic rewinding on the drive. And what's the advantage of that, you might say? Well, that's to keep the edge of the film outside the canister rather than rolling it all the way back in. And a lot of film people, especially if they produced their own film, wanted that feature. So that's a back what came with that camera. And also another thing which was different that came with it was the focusing screen. Instead of coming with a K screen, it came with a Type B screen, which is a matte Fresnel with a 3mm fine ground spot and a 12mm reference circle. And the reason for that mainly is because a lot of the press photojournalists use telephoto lenses, and the K screen is not very good for telephoto lenses because it's got a split image prism in the middle, and they tend to darken or go black with small apertures. So that wasn't something that was very useful for people using telephoto lenses, so they put in this standard B screen instead. Other changes, say another thing, on the weather sealing, which I've got to mention, is there's a plastic cover around the ASA dial as well to prevent water getting through that way. Going to other features on this camera that's different to the standard F3, the power on and shutter lock mechanism is different. And on the F3 it's a lever that's at the base of the top plate, and it covers that red dot, and you move the lever clockwise and covers the dot, and that turns the power on and unlocks the shutter button. And on this one it's a different mechanism altogether, and they actually changed the way it works, which seems a bit strange. It's a mechanical operation on this one. You press this little pin in, and to switch the power on this one you do it the opposite way around. You switch the power on by pushing the pin in and pushing it towards the red dot, and that switches the power on and unlocks the shutter button. So obviously a lot of people going from F3s to the F3P found that to obviously be different, but if you've only used this particular camera, obviously it doesn't make any difference whatsoever. Other differences that they've made is to the frame counter window. It's larger and a round window, and it uses white numerals instead of green, and I think they made it larger and made the numerals white because it's clearer. Obviously that's the reason for that. The shutter dial is higher as well. It's got the same functions and operations on it, but it sits up higher. The standard F3 one is a lot lower, and again that's for making it more easier to get hold of, especially if you've got gloves on. Especially photojournalists working in the winter with gloves on, it just makes it easier to operate the camera. Other things that they actually took off this, there is no multi-exposure lever, which was here on the standard F3. They removed that feature altogether because it wasn't something the press wanted. There's no self-timer or light, and I say a self-timer switch was around the shutter dial on the standard F3. They removed that altogether and just blanked off where the light used to be. There's no lock lever to open the camera back. On the standard F3 there's a lever you have to pull before you can lift the rewind crank up. I'm not showing you this now because I've actually got a film in this camera. On this one you just literally pull the rewind crank up and it opens the back. Again, that's done obviously for speed, to allow people to get the film out quicker. There's no cable release on this. Obviously you can see, because the rubber covers the whole shutter, on the standard F3 it had a threaded centre for fitting a shutter cable, release cable. But obviously the press, it's not something the press would use. They'd always be hand holding the camera. And just to mention as well, even if you take the rubber off, the shutter button isn't threaded, so they didn't use the same part. It's all completely new. Other things missing are the eyepiece shutter. On the standard F3 there's a lever here which is just blank where the hole would have been, and there would have been a lever that operated a cover the viewfinder for, again, if you stood it on a tripod and you didn't want the light from the outside affecting the exposure. But again, because the press didn't use that feature of a tripod, always hand holding the camera, they removed that feature as well. The only other thing that they added, which was a big gripe with the original F3, was the shutter speed setting of 1/80th of a second when you first inserted a film. So originally what they did was, if you put a film in the F3, the shutter speed was set at 1/80th of a second, and it did show you that through the viewfinder until the frame counter got to 1, and then different shutter speeds and settings could be made. On this model they changed it so you can select what shutter speed you like immediately, straight away. That restriction isn't there. So obviously that's something that obviously the press wanted, and it allowed them to get even more photos on the on a roll of film. So there you go, that's a look at the F3P. Just a quick look, just point out the differences, and I hope to make another video soon. Catch you later.